Shalom, friends. Good evening from Jerusalem, and good day wherever you are and whatever your time zone is. I'm delighted to say that this is the first time, I think, almost the first time, that both our Israel chair and our US chair are together in the same webinar. I think our US chair, Stanley Gold, was present at the session that you, Alan Baker, Ambassador Alan Baker, have given about the Hague process. So it may not be the first time, but it's wonderful to see both of you and to have both of you participate. And I'm also delighted to say that our sponsoring organizations are all well represented here. Ruach Hidush, Rabbis and Cantors for Religious Freedom and Equality in Israel, with a number of rabbis in the meeting, and JPLAN, the Jewish Pluralism Legal Action Network, and a number of possibly all three co-chairs are here, and the AAJLJ, the American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists. We are very grateful to all of you and delighted to be partnering with you. This is a sombering webinar. And I think when you hear it all, you will agree. The situation in Israel, and Professor Suzie Navot of the Israel Democracy Institute has been with us before, speaking about the judicial upheaval, judicial reform, however one prefers to call it. But since the war, and as it has protracted, we are facing a relaunch on all fronts of that very judicial upheaval. And the events on Thursday, with thousands of demonstrators gathering near the Supreme Court, and the news the next day carrying the story and the pictures of a gallery window at the Supreme Court being broken because during the demonstration, someone apparently used an air gun to shoot into the court. And the Prime Minister himself, Benjamin Netanyahu, has issued a widely distributed video clip urging people to come to that demonstration, which targeted the Supreme Court and the Attorney General in the most horrific terminology, headed by the key speakers, and there were 22 speakers in that demonstration, and among them the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Finance, and quite a number of others who have left nothing to the imagination in terms of their rejection of the legitimacy of the law agencies, the key law agencies, and law enforcement senior official, the Attorney General. And during that demonstration and the next day, they made it very clear that as far as they are concerned, they would not abide by the court rulings. And there are a number of key issues that are pending that they were referring to. So we could have no better person to bring us into the current situation, what has led to it, and what we may be seeing unfolding, than Professor Suzie Navot. Those of you who have been with us before know her and heard her. She is the Vice President for Research of the Israel Democracy Institute that has become truly a front and center, not just think tank, but action tank on all matters involving the challenges facing Israeli democracy today. Their research is amazing, their publications are enlightening, and their polling, their public opinion polling, which they do monthly and annually, is superb. So anyone who wants to understand more about the challenges to democracy in Israel don't have to wait until the next time we have Professor Suzie Navot with us. Log on to the IDI website and take advantage of their remarkable resources. She's a professor of constitutional law, and the go-to person that I set for myself, reading her op-eds, reading her analysis, and watching her videos, and I am delighted, and we are honored to have you with us, Professor Navot. So you will provide us with an introduction to the topic, which you have defined as courts under fire. So there's been a gunshot so far, and let's hope that does not turn into a literal fire, though, frankly, there is no telling. I asked you to include in presenting the topic, helping our participants from overseas understand the differences between our legal systems. And for instance, since the Attorney General has become such a target in this ordeal, how is the institution of the Attorney General different in Israel? Professor Navot will speak for about half an hour to 40 minutes, and then we'll turn to your questions. Please use the chat and write your comments, your questions. We'll try to respond to as many as possible, and see if we can deal with those that have not been answered in writing. One more thing before I turn the microphone over to Professor Navot, and that is, save the date, June 30th, Monday at 7 p.m. We'll have the next webinar, and actually I will speak in that next webinar, and thinking about James Carville's sort of memorable line, "It's the economy, stupid." I would say that something that is less understood by Jewish communities throughout the world, including activists and leaders, that one may say about the situation in Israel, it's the church-state conflict, stupid. One cannot understand many of the things that we are facing today, literally today, because the government doesn't seem to be fazed by the demonstrations regarding the war, regarding the hostages, regarding anything else. The one thing that may actually bring down this government is the draft law, or rather the non-draft law. I won't be speaking any more about it. We'll talk about that and many more issues involving the connection between the religion and state clash and the challenges facing Israel on June 30th. Professor Navot, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Uri, for this presentation. Good morning or good evening to you all. Here is, in Herzliya, it's 7 after 7 p.m. I'm sure that from the light I see in your windows, it's morning out there. It's a pleasure to see you again. Some of you have already met. I will start with a very, very brief, I think, background and something that I guess many of you know, but just to make sure, because Uri said that I have to give you the differences between Israel and the United States. As you know, not only Israel, in many countries, we are under a wave of populism, of populist leaders. And the problem in Israel is that the constitutional structure of Israel exposes it to the danger of populist leaders much more than in any other democracy. We have no tools at all that limit political power. We do not have what you have in the United States. We do not have really the idea of checks and balances. We do not have a rigid constitution which protects my human rights and the rules of the game. We do not have the splitting of the legislature into two houses, which are elected in different ways. We do not have regional elections. We do not have a federal structure. And we do not have a veto given to the president on legislation. We have only one Knesset, 120 members, and 61 of them is all you need to change everything, to change the character of the state, to change the system of government, to become a non-democratic state, to delete any human right. 61 is absolute power in Israel. And this is very important to understand everything that is happening here. This government has 68 votes, meaning that more than 61. And therefore, they said, yes, we can. As Obama used to say, yes, we can do it. We can change and we can dismiss and we can fire and we can appoint and we can do anything we want because that's the way Israel is ruled. And the Supreme Court of Israel is actually the only branch that may limit this absolute power. And therefore, the Supreme Court, its powers, its independence, and its jurisdiction, they have been under attack in Israel since January 2023. We do not have actually three branches. You know that the government in Israel controls completely the Knesset, meaning that if the government has a coalition of more than 61, the Knesset actually does not really exist. It's like, you know, it's a long hand. It's a branch of the Knesset is a branch of the government used to legislate whatever the government wants. Now, we have two versions of this judicial review that Uri mentioned on his on the beginning of his speech. The first one, which we spoken about last year, is the one brought by the Minister of Justice on January 2023, called the Judicial Reform, a plan which actually comprised the big change in the basic laws of Israel. We will introduce an override clause, meaning that we will require a simple majority in the Knesset to enact anything that it wishes, even if it has to do with my rights, my human rights. We will take this override clause, meaning that the Knesset will be able to enact or to pass any law that it wishes. We will eliminate the standard of reasonableness. We will remove the Supreme Court's ability to strike down basic laws. We will make the legal advisors of government political appointees. And we change, of course, the composition of the Judicial Selection Committee, meaning that the coalition will appoint the judges. And the coalition wanted not really liberal or conservative judges, but it wanted coalition judges, exactly following the protocol used in Poland, Hungary, and before that in Turkey, Russia, Venezuela, okay, what we call the declining democracies. And as you well know, this reform that actually dealt with the big basic laws brought hundreds of thousands of Israelis to the street every Saturday night, all of them chanting the word democracy with the national flag. And finally, out of this reform, the Knesset managed only to pass in July of that year, in July 2023, the amendment regarding regarding the reasonable test, which was actually declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court by 15 judges sitting on the bench. 13 out of 15 said that the court had the power to strike down basic laws which actually infringe upon the basic values of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, which means another limitation for the Knesset. We can strike down laws, regular laws, but we can also strike down basic laws. And then came October 7th. And with it, there was a period of quiet on these issues. But eventually, after some month passed, the government returned to their, first of all, they stayed in power, which was actually something that was not, we did not believe it could happen. Just to tell you something, from our rooms, we in IDI, the first thing we did after we we recovered the first month, because we helped everywhere possible. The first thing we did is to say, let's prepare the plans for the day after, for the morning after. What are the plans to be, what will the next government do? That was a month and a half after the war. But we are already almost 18 months afterwards. A year, almost 2 years afterwards, and nothing has changed. So the second version of the judicial overhaul actually appeared. It's like, it's another version. It's like your iPhone that you have, or your cell phone that you change to a new version all the time, which has, more power and more battery and more features. The Judicial Review 2.0 is exactly the same. Different tools, wider scope, much less basic laws to be amended, much more executive governmental decisions. And this new judicial overhaul that we are witnessing every day, and it's actually quite difficult for us, it's about taking over taking over appointments and dismissals, meaning that we take over an institution we capture the institution by changing the persons sitting in the institution. It's about weakening the judiciary, changing the law of the Judicial Selection Committee. Now a new proposal by Levin is to lower the salary of the judges. And we have seen for months the refusal to appoint a Chief Justice, the President of the Court, and especially weakening the last gatekeepers in Israel, meaning trying to get rid of them, firing the Shin Bet head, Ronen Bar, or by ignoring him, and the threats, and more than threats, to fire the Attorney General. Now, let me explain, as Uri requested, the role of the Attorney General in Israel, in the Israeli system, which is something that is completely, it's a special, I think, institution, unlike anything that you may know. In Israel, the government is subject to the law, just like us, the citizens. We must obey the law. And the one who defines the law, the limits of the law for the government, is the Attorney General. She, this time is a she is the legal interpreter of the law for the government. She is also the legal advisor of the government, as well as the head of the prosecution. She has many roles. Now, the role of the legal advisor to the government, of the Attorney General, is not to tell the government what to do, or if the policy of the government or the policy the government wants to promote is good or bad. Her job is to frame the limits of the law. Okay, within this rectangle, you can take 100,000 decisions in this point, but all the decisions are legal. What you cannot do is to go outside the frame. And according to the Supreme Court rulings, this interpretation of the law reflects for the government the legal situation, and it means that it is binding for the government. So if the government wants to act against the law, to take decisions that are against the law, the Attorney General will not allow it. And that is the problem. Because it looks like for months now that the ministers and the government, the ministers, the Prime Minister, decided to act according to the will. To their will, even if the Attorney General said that this decision is illegal. For example, the legal advisor wrote, you mentioned, Uri, the draft law. So the legal advisor wrote that legally it's not possible to finance the daycare of those who do not enlist into the army, according to the law. So what, said the Minister of Finance? I want to finance them anyway. She wrote that the legal promotion in the police cannot be done. So what, said the Minister of the Police? I want to promote him anyway. She wrote that the Prime Minister has to reconsider the appointment of Ben-Gvir as the Minister of the Police. So what, they said? We'll do it anyway. She wrote that the government cannot appoint a new head for the Shin Bet without a proper and special procedure, because Netanyahu is under a big, huge problem of conflict of interest, and the Shin Bet is nowadays investigating suspected security crimes within its office. So the government read the decision by the Attorney General, saying you cannot appoint it until I propose the new special procedure, and they said, so what? And the morning after, they appointed a new head anyway, the General Zini, which is at the moment, he's not the head of the Shin Bet. For this moment, the appointment is freezed. So the Attorney General is a key check on government power. And this government is seeking to remove any limitation it has, to say to the courts, you cannot interfere, and to say to the Attorney General, even if your decisions, your opinions are binding, we do not want to follow them. Now, what happens actually, every decision that the governments decide not to go through it, not to follow, people present petitions to the court. And the court said to the government, your decision is void. You have to follow the rule of the Attorney General. Time after time, I have counted 15 petitions and in less than a year, all dealing with the same idea. Now they want to fire her. Okay, the firing of Attorney General is a long process because according to a government decision, you need a special committee that approves the appointment and also the dismissal, the firing of the Attorney General. And for the moment, the committee, which has 5 members, is not full. There are 2 missing, one member of the Knesset and one former Minister of Justice or former Attorney General. And the government has problems finding a former Minister of Justice, which actually will be, he will consider dismissing the Attorney General. So they cannot, they cannot actually, they cannot start the procedure because the committee is not full. So what happened? Yesterday, a decision by the government to change the procedure. They started the procedure, but they cannot go through, so they changed the rules of the game in the middle of the game. The government makes a decision to change the way the Attorney General is fired here, after this dismissal procedure has already begun. And also there is no real reason, according to the procedure, to fire the legal advisor. The government might actually terminate the term if it has substantial and prolonged differences of opinion between the government and the legal advisor. But what difference of opinion are here with the legal advisor? The only differences of opinion are in the cases that the government ignores her legal opinion because the government wants to act contrary to the law. And this is not exactly a difference of opinion. And I think that we have we have a real problem. This morning, there's a new letter by the new procedure saying to the Attorney General, you are invited next week for a hearing before we actually fire you. Next Tuesday, we will hear you and we will fire you. And for the moment, we're waiting for a decision to the court, perhaps with an injunction or an interim decision, to stop this proceeding. Because what we're seeing now, and I actually have a quoting from the President of the Supreme Court, Amit, in a decision rendered a few days ago dealing with the dismissal of the Shin Bet head, Ronen Bar. He said, and I quote, as has been ruled many times in the past, making decisions out of a desire to reach a certain result while making the goal around the arrow without examining the factual situation or the relevant considerations. This is an arbitrary and invalid decision that is null and void. So this is what we're seeing, the decision to fire the gatekeepers and to change them. Instead of gatekeepers, we will have bodyguards, I always say. In Hebrew is much better, the shomer saf and מה שנקרא shomer rosh, which uses the same word. And perhaps I think what we're seeing, which is the most important thing for me, it's the idea of breaking the rules, the breaking of convention, of norms, the violation of the law, the waiver of proper procedures in legislation, in decision making. I call it a procedure. What we are seeing in Israel every day is a procedural chaos. The attempt to give up on professional opinions, to ignore the legal advisor's instructions, to make decisions here and now, even if they are completely improper and completely unreasonable, because that is what we want. That's all. For example, for decades, the Supreme Court president has been appointed according to the seniority system. The judge that has been sitting in the court for the longest time, he will be the president. But this government said, not for us. We will not allow for the appointment of Justice Amit. Finally, he was appointed. The government does not have a majority on the committee for selecting judges. No judges are elected. They do not convene the committee. We are short of judges. I think dozens of judges are missing, but there is no committee because they don't have a majority. We change the rules. Dismissing the head of the Shin Bet requires a proper procedure. The government says, no, not for us. Here and now, we decide to fire him. Appointing a new head of the Shin Bet during this period imposes obligations on the government. There's a special way to do it. We will do the opposite. We will change the rules. And this is the new version of the judicial overhaul. We are seeing also some, legislative initiatives that have been passed and that are going to pass. For example, a new change of the Judicial Selecting Committee, increasing the political power at the expenses of the professional members of the committee. We have seen the capture of the ombudsman of the judiciary, exactly like they did in Hungary, which actually is the one to handle complaints against judges. So it looks a bit different today, but the government is still choosing to focus its efforts on actually taking over, capturing, chipping away the few checks there are on government power. And let me remind you that there is another problem here, because the government is focusing all the time in these legal issues. Uri mentioned the demonstration, a governmental demonstration against the rule of law. That's the only way I can see it. And if the government is focusing on these issues, it means that the government is not focusing on areas in which there is actually a broad consensus among the citizens. For example, you know that left, center, and right in Israel, a big majority of Israel support ending the war in exchange of bringing all the hostages home. Nobody is talking about the hostages this morning. Now, over 70% of Israelis, including about 85% of the non-Haredi in Israel, think that ultra-Orthodox men need to serve in the IDF. Now, the only way the government is taking care of this issue, and you will hear it in your next webinar, as you already said, is, okay, what do the Haredim want in order to stay in government and not go to elections? Over 60%, almost 70% of the Israelis want a state commission of inquiry into what happened on October 7th. But nobody's taking care of these issues. Only 1/3 of the Israelis supported the change in the Judicial Selection Committee. And if I ask you, what is the priority of the government, what the priority of the government should be nowadays, the judicial overhaul, as a majority, only 8% of the population said that judicial overhaul is the main issue to deal with. So the government is actually prioritizing all the unpopular initiatives, which actually causes hate and stress, at the cost of things that could truly improve the security and well-being of Israelis. And yes, despite all this, and despite the words that you said, Uri, this is a somber talk, I want to end my talk on an optimistic note. And I want to tell you that, very simply, that our hope is not lost. Od lo avda tikvatenu, like our anthem. Israel has many reasons for optimism, even this morning or this afternoon. Because we still have courageous professional officials. We still have a public that is not indifferent. We still have gatekeepers which are still here, and a legal system that is still strong. For example, the Attorney General and the attorneys who work with her, the legal advisors, and many professionals at the public service, that they are still giving opinions that are professional, sharp, and clear, and what is illegal will not pass and does not pass, despite all the threats. There is a long line of public officials who are loyal to the public, not loyal to the government. And they are determined to continue to act according to the law. We have Yitzhak Amit, the president of the Supreme Court. Amit will not be president, we were told, but he is the president of the Supreme Court, and he will be the president for the next almost 4 years. He headed the 2 presidential rulings given last month, which sharply and clearly actually tell us and clarify us the methods for appointing and firing 2 central gatekeepers, the Civil Service Commissioner and the head of the Shin Bet. He is the one who said last week that the attempt to undermine the principle of judicial independence will not succeed. And this is, for me, a source of optimism. Also, a ruling on the military service, on the draft law, is also, for me, a reason for optimism. This is a ruling given more or less than a year ago that makes it clear that the court will not compromise in the event of a violation of the law and will not compromise on the rule of law. And in this matter, the question whether there is a conservative judge sitting or a liberal judge sitting is irrelevant, because the decision was rendered 9-0, meaning all the judges, 1 vote. For me, also, the public struggle for the hostages in Gaza is a reason for optimism, because it teaches us more than anything else that the basic values of our society are still here. The importance of the ransom of captives, the mutual guarantee, the solidarity of the majority of Israelis. There is something here that you can build upon. And finally, I think we, the people of Israel, we still fight, we still stick to our rights and fight for a Jewish and a democratic state and refuse to normalize what cannot be normalized. There is a civil awakening and a strong, I think, democratic consciousness that we really didn't know it existed. It's still here, and this is, I think, a good reason to look forward with hope. We have entered this stage of democratic backsliding with a much stronger foundation and much higher standards than those of the countries that have made all the way down to autocracy. And this is very important. And for me, and I think also for you, the fight for the values of the State of Israel as a democratic state is not only the fight of the Israelis. The struggle for democracy and freedom is also your fight. It's wide, and here each and every one of us has a role. So on this happy note, happy in these dark days, I do hope for a better future. I do hope for the war to end and for the return, first of all our hostages. I hope I did it on time, Uri, and
thank you, Professor Navot.
Thank you for
you
having me.
never disappoint us. Already some of the questions really follow up naturally on the things that you said. And if there are others who want to present questions, please use the chat. So one question was, we spoke about the Attorney General, and you spoke about firing the Attorney General, but how is the Attorney General appointed? A couple other questions that really go even more direct.
I can see the questions, Uri, and I think I will read them. And if you allow me, I will answer each and every one of them.
Well, by all means.
Or not, it's your decision.
Thank you. Let me just say that a number of questions have a bottom line, and the bottom line is, who enforces the decisions of the Supreme Court? So you spoke about the Supreme Court ruling against the government, but does the court have the power to enforce its decisions? And if the clash continues, what happens next?
I think that Bruce actually asked that, and it's a very good question. Well, this is a question that has never been posed in Israel. And we hope it will never be posed, because if the government does not follow a court decision, the government has, of course, tools, for financing, for putting sanctions on a person that actually does not comply with a decision. But it's not something that has ever been done towards the government. And I think the day it happens, and I hope it will never happen, it's the day of our, I think, democratic clash or breakdown, or you put the names, crisis, because it's a black flag for us. I think that this moment is what some of the people are waiting for in order to take to the streets, stop working, only protest, etc., etc. So what happened next if they ignore a Supreme Court ruling is a question. Is like, is you say, okay, we are having a chaotic situation and are going to anarchy. What happens there? I really don't know. And I hope I will not have to deal with it. the only thing that we can do as citizens is actually to use our right to demonstrate. There are people talking about other ways. I hope it will not become violent in any way. But the question is, if I have to comply with the law, and the government has to do the same. If I have to pay my taxes according to the law, the government has to do the same. So it's something that breaks, this contract, the social contract with the state. And when you break it, I think that it will be very difficult to amend it. So we do hope we do not get
I'll be going on soon.
Elliot, you appeared on the screen.
Oh,
can you
no.
mute yourself? Okay, I'm muting everybody, and Suzie, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. About the appointment of the Attorney General.
Well, it's a commission, actually. The government, it's a commission presided by a Supreme Court judge, former Supreme Court judge, comprises of five persons. The same commission that needs to be actually together nowadays in order to fire Gali Bahrav Miara. But the commission at the moment is not full, and this commission actually is the one that proposes to the government. This commission goes to people and says, would you like to be a nominee, a candidate for the job? And the government actually, or people go to present the candidature to this commission, and the commission, they interview the nominees, and they said, we have 3 persons that are all of them are perfect, and the government chooses from them, or 2 persons, or 1. Gali Bahrav Miara was the only one chosen by the commission, and also Mandelblit before her. So it's a commission that is actually, it has not from the government, but it has people from the exterior, not the interior of the government, because it's a gatekeeper. It needs to be independent. It's the one that guards the rule of law in the government. So we do not want somebody whose loyalty is to the government, but the loyalty should be to the rule of law. And therefore, a Supreme Court judge, a bar member, a professor from the university elected by the deans of the university, a former Minister of Justice or Attorney General, and a Supreme Court judge. That is actually the committee.
Before we move on to a couple other questions that have been asked, just a follow-up comment on what you said, and there's good news and bad news. Maybe the good news first. You pointed out to a level of optimism that we should share. I would say that while the public is tired and under tremendous stress for a variety of reasons, I personally believe that if we get to the point that the government outright defies a ruling of the Supreme Court, the public is going to pour into the streets in a way that's completely unprecedented. I think that's a line that would sort of be the trigger for a critical mass that no government would be able to resist. The bad news is, and maybe you, I'm sure you remember, and maybe you want to refer to it. The current Minister of Justice was the Speaker of the Knesset. And the Supreme Court ruled regarding the need for the Knesset to follow its own procedures and law. And Yariv Levin, then the Speaker of the Knesset, as far as I remember, but maybe
it was Edelstein. You're talking about Edelstein.
Well, I'm talking about Levin, actually. So Levin was already the Minister of Justice then. Edelstein was the Speaker of the Knesset. No matter. But what matters is what Levin said. Levin said, we will not abide by the court ruling. And if the Chief Justice then wants to, let her lead the court's guard service and take over the Knesset. That was as sharp a defiance of the court as one may think of. So the historic memory is painful, but the optimistic outlook as to the people's support for the rule of law and support for the Supreme Court is certainly encouraging. There were,
this morning, actually, another minister said that she will not comply with the decision of the Supreme Court, and also, like you said, Levin said. And my answer to that is, well, I know my grandmother used to say it in Yiddish much better than I will, but so she said. So he said, okay, I will not use my Yiddish in that. But nothing happened. They can speak. They can try to intimidate the court. They can threaten the court. For the moment, nothing is done on that threat, and I think that's a problem. But it did not happen. For them, every decision for the moment has been the decisions by the Supreme Court have been followed more or less until this moment. And I agree with you that this is a line that should not be crossed because nobody knows what will happen in Israel. But I really, Yariv Levin is talking a lot. But actually, for almost 2 years now, there is no real change that he actually did. And if you want to go on with the questions.
Yeah, so I said there were a couple other questions, and then there are actually more questions that you can look at. But a couple of questions that were asked before. One, there are a number of participants who say you may be painting the situation in the US in too rosy a manner. And actually, there are more similarities to the crisis in Israel and that in the US. And the question is, you spoke about that, but if the president of the US controls the National Guard and he controls other, arms, other agencies, if that happens, can the Supreme Court actually, what will the Supreme Court do? And the other question was Israel's situation, as you describe it, is dysfunctional. Is it not time for a constitutional convention to be convened and try and finally form a constitution for Israel? There are some who are trying to pursue this idea. I have my own reservations, but you are the expert.
Yeah, that's a question by Shulamit, which I liked it very much. I wish we could have a broad constitutional convention, but in order to build something together for the many groups in Israel, you need for the grass to be green in order to grow something. And for the moment, the grass, it looks like Chernobyl. It's radioactive. So I think, first of all, we should come back to our values. I think that the idea to start with the Declaration of Independence, if we ever have a government that would like to go forward in order to build a constitution, all the chapters are here. We only need to finish the project that has started in 1950. And I hope, but first of all, I will not start with a rigid procedural constitution like some try to promote here in Israel. Much on the contrary, I would like to speak about the shared values of Israel, the idea of a Jewish and democratic state. What does it mean? To speak about the rule of law, the separation of powers, to speak about human rights, and see if slowly if we can build something together, because the amount of hate in Israel is something that, for me, being an ole chadash yashan, somebody that came to Israel from other country, is something that I couldn't even, in my worst nightmares, that I could see. And this is something that has to be, first of all, dealt with. It's a very good question, Shulamit, a very good wish, I think. About the United States, I didn't paint any rosy. I only spoke about the checks and balances still, even if you have some of the same problems. I know there are things that the president cannot do. He cannot change the Constitution of the United States. It will be very difficult to impose the will in every one of the states and in every court in every one of the states. So I don't know if the court itself can enforce the decisions. For the moment, I see that there are many decisions against things that he has already done. But it remains to be seen how the United States will deal with a president that has a lot of power, a personal power. You know, when we talk about constitution, I think that two great scholars, Werner Bodganer and Feiner, used to say that a constitution is like the lock on your door. If you live among people that are, completely, normal people, nobody will enter even if the door is open. And if you live among burglars and criminals, even the best of the locks will not actually save your house. So the constitution is like this lock. You don't need it in countries like New Zealand or England if they follow the rule of law without a constitution, and if they keep the rules of the game, and if they use something that is not legal, but it's called "it is not done." And if you have a law which is very big in Russia, which has a constitution with 50 sections of human rights, but there is nobody that will protect them, then why you don't need a constitution? So I think that the United States will pass through some times, months, to see where it stands. Most of the countries actually are not on the edges, but on the middle. You need a constitution just, to bring back the people to the main road, to say to the government, this is illegal, please, come back to the right way. So we'll see. I know there are many similarities, not only between the United States and Israel. Israel is really actually following step by step the protocols used in populist countries, especially Hungary. Every idea is translated and put forward as a bill, proposed as a bill in Israel.
The chair of Chidush in Israel, Alan Baker, wrote a critical note, and I am very much aware of what he wrote, namely, yes, we are indeed one-sided, but I'll be happy to take the challenge to, if you recommend, Alan, if you recommend a reputable jurist who will present the counter position,
There's no
we
such
will
thing.
schedule. Huh?
There's no such thing as a reputable jurist.
Well, So if it's not a reputable jurist, then I think it's clear why we present what we present. But the point that you made, I think, is very important for us to bear in mind. Namely, neither Professor Navot nor practically anyone who is opposing the government's initiatives is suggesting that the Supreme Court is perfect or the Attorney General is perfect. I think everybody is in agreement that a responsible review of both the court's operations and the Attorney General's policies is in place, but not one that would destroy the very fabric of the rule of law in Israel. Yeah, Ellen, I can't refuse my chair.
No, no. Look, I'm not arguing with you. All I'm saying is this: that Professor Navot, with all the due respect, she's widely considered to be a stark opponent of the legal reform. And as a lawyer, I've heard substantive reasoning, logical reasoning by some of those who are supporting it. I'm not saying every part of their reasoning is sound, but there are some logical aspects of their reasoning that is comprehensible, is understandable, and possibly justified. I'm just saying that I think it would do justice to the issue that we're discussing if all of us here in this discussion were to be privy to such reasoning, so that we wouldn't just be presented with a one-sided picture. That's all.
Alan, we have a deal. You recommend the speaker on that side, and we will schedule a session.
Okay.
But back to Professor Suzie Navot. So,
actually, I would like to comment on that.
Sure.
I'm sorry, but I see myself as a professional. I don't care who is the head of the government. And I was very critical on other governments as well. Led by Olmert, I was the first one who called him to resign because he was indicted. There are a lot of reforms to be done to the judicial system and to the Attorney General. I am the one that actually supports the splitting of this job. But what I see...
Say a word about the splitting.
Splitting means that she's also the legal advisor of the government. She represents the rule of law, and she is also the head of the prosecution. And what people actually do not know is that she is the one that actually represents the interest of the public in court, meaning that she can actually enter any case dealing with any issue and says, this is what the Attorney General's position is. Even if you have something that, an adoption case, okay, and there is a problem. Should this baby be adopted by the genetical mother, or the one actually that they carried the baby on and gave birth to the baby? And the Attorney General should present her opinion in the court. Now, when you have these 4 jobs, which is all of them are enormous, one person actually, I think that it's impossible to do them perfect, especially nowadays. So I think that we can speak about having a head of the prosecution, having a legal advisor for the government, at least 2. But this is something that you need a commission for that, and you need to take it seriously. There are many reforms to be done on the judiciary, many of them. Also in the composition, the selection of judges, the composition of the selection of judges committee. Everything is possible. My argument is, what is the main point of the government? Why is it acting against the law? What they want to achieve, and how come that everything that has been written about declining democracy is happening here? So it has nothing to do with another version. I think I can give you names of distinguished professors that that can come and speak perhaps in a different way. But I'm sorry, Alan, we actually haven't met Professor Baker. But I see myself as somebody that my theme of research is institutions, and what I'm seeing about the institutions worries me, and I don't care exactly which government is now doing that. And I will say the same in the next government if I need to. And I think that the first thing that has to be amended in the judiciary is the time that it takes for a court to rule on a criminal case. And my example for that is the case of Netanyahu. It is inhuman. It is unbearable. It's impossible to understand that somebody has to sit in court 5 years after the indictment was presented to the court and almost 10 years after the investigation. This is something that has to be taken seriously and amended immediately. That's all I wanted to tell you.
So we'll finish in just a few minutes for those who are watching the watch. Steve Greenwald, the former chair of the American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists and a good friend of both Suzie and myself, is saying, isn't the major barrier to constitution the opposition of the religious sector to any equal rights provisions?
Actually, I think that is something that can be dealt with. When you say equality, when you say human rights, you never give somebody 100% of its human rights. Because if I give you, Stephen, 100% of, and you know that, of your freedom of speech, then you can use it, okay, to tell the secrets of the state and to libel and slander, etc., etc. So every right is something that is, it depends on other rights. And I think the same would be with equality. Israel will never be 100% democratic, and it will never be 100% Jewish. We have to balance between both of them. And the question is how you balance the principle of equality and still keep the Jewish state. Until, I think, the last 10 years, this balance, delicate balance, was not bad at all. Perhaps we have to take a picture of that and say, okay, can we write it down? Everyone is, everyone is born equal. Okay. Still, there will be some limitations on the right of equality that will allow the Jewish religious people to keep some of the way of living. If we cannot do that, then the project of Israel is the Eugene Kendall project, meaning the separation of the country into, cantons or other or federal ideas. And I really don't, I would not want that personally. Oh. So we have to deal with this balance. And there are some, there are some ideas already that have been put into propositions and bills dealing with the principle of equality. That we have it because the Supreme Court said we have it, but it's not a principle of 100%. Not everyone is equal all the time, everywhere.
Well, I've heard actually, Steve, I think that there is a lot of you are right. Possibly I see it beyond what Professor Navot has just said, namely, when Dan Meridor attempted to present back in the late 80s, early 90s, a Bill of Rights, right, the religious parties boycotted or basically crossed out that possibility, saying civil rights are incompatible with Judaism and therefore we will not allow such a bill to pass. When finally the late Professor Amnon Rubinstein was able to take out of the original draft the basic law on human liberty and dignity, what was missing in it was exactly what you were saying, namely, there is no explicit protection of the principle of equality. And when the late Michael Eitan, who was the chair of the Law and Constitution Committee and tried with every, fiber in his body to try and advance a constitution, the clash over religious freedom on the one hand and equality of Israel's Arab citizens on the other made it clear that a constitution, that possibly we are too late in coming to that project. You may see it differently, Professor Navot.
Well, I first heard this proposition, Suzie, at a two-day symposium that the IDI held about 10 years ago or more on, can Israel enact the Constitution, or something like that. And it stuck in my mind that one of the major problems or barriers was this demand from the ultra-Orthodox or the Orthodox or religious parties, I don't know you call them, that there not be any equal rights provision in any constitution. And if you don't have an equal rights provision, you don't have a constitution. So that was the
Professor
idea.
You want to comment on that further? Or
I would just tell you that I think the same, Stephen. There is no constitution without the principle of equality.
Right.
I think that the Orthodox, the problem was not what shall be written, but who will be the interpreter, who will make the interpretation of the principle of equality.
Right.
But actually, the interpretation is only on the hands of the Supreme Court. But I think there is something that if you really want to, you can achieve that. We will never have a constitution that will be supported by 80% of the people of Israel. We have 20% that will not agree with that. We have another 20% or 13% with the religious or the Orthodox that perhaps they will not live with that. But if we want 100% we, the people of Israel's constitution, we will never have it. And the situation today, I think, is not good enough. The possibility of every government that controls the Knesset to change the basic principles of the state and with an unbearable lightness is something that should be, I think, dealt with.
And to the last question,
yes.
The reality is that the Knesset is going to be discussing the bill to disband itself. There are tremendous pressures from different directions on the government to vacate its office. What are the options at this point that are open to Israel and to Israelis to, let me put it crudely, bring down the government?
The legal options in the Knesset are two. The first one is what you said, the law passed by a majority of 61 in 4 readings, saying that we will have elections, and within the law you say the date, and the date can be from 90 days until 5 months. The minimum is 90 days, maximum is 5 months. This is the law that the preliminary reading will be passed on Wednesday. I do not see it going further than the first reading, but perhaps. The second option, which is also, I think, quite rare, it has never happened before, is what we call a non-confidence vote. But in Israel, the non-confident votes, which you have in parliamentary state, meaning that if there is a majority that does not support the government, a majority in the Knesset that does not support the government, they vote against the government and the government falls. It was the situation in Israel until 2015, when they changed the rules, actually without a real public discussion, and actually wrote that we will not have a non-confidence vote against the government, but it will be a constructive non-confidence, meaning that if you want to take down the government by a vote on the Knesset, you need to present a new government in this vote. Meaning that, let's, for example, say that some of the religious parties will now step down from the government and pass to the opposition. And the opposition will gain, I don't know how, 61. We do not have a real opposition. It's not, the Republicans and the Democratic. We have parties that have nothing in common between them. We do not have an ideology, a coherent ideologic opposition. Meaning that, for example, the Rabbi Goldknopf will have to sit with Ayman Ude from the Arab Party. The Ayman Ude will be the Minister of Interior, and Goldknopf will be the Minister of the External Relations. You have to form a government. You have to mention one of the opposition to be the Prime Minister, and you have to present, the lines of the government to the Knesset, and then vote. You have to vote for a new government. And since the law was changed, the basic law was changed, no government ever fell on a non-vote, on a non-confident vote. So the only way that I see is actually this law that will disperse the Knesset. And to tell you the truth, I'm not very optimistic about that. What I'm doing now is worrying about the next, and I'm sorry, Alan, if it bothers you, I am worried about the next actually elections and the possibility, to change the rules of the game within the elections, to change the person in charge of the elections, which is a Supreme Court judge, to say we do not want Supreme Court judges, we want something from our side, and to do something to the elections. This is, between all the balls that I have on the table, this is the one that for me is the most important.
Professor Navot, that's not the note that I thought we would end with. So another optimistic note? Well, as I said,
we are all here and we care, and this is, I think, what's important. People care. They are part of our they take part in this democracy. The democratic spirit is here to stay. For me, this is the most important thing in Israel.
So maybe we'll end with just a sort of a partial optimistic observation, and that is that both the polls of the Israel Democracy Institute and the polls that Judicial has conducted over the years and last year show that whereas public trust has indeed been eroded in a variety of state institutions, including the Supreme Court, it would be a surprise if it didn't erode, given the ongoing assault on the Supreme Court by, from the Prime Minister to the Minister of Justice to everyone else on that camp. And of course, the religious leaders who basically talk about the Supreme Court being an illegitimate entity. We need a rabbinic ruling over Israel. With all of that, still consistently, when the public is asked, whom do you have most trust in? The trust in the Supreme, the highest level of trust is oddly in the army. There is a relatively high level of trust in the president. But within the relevant entities, namely Supreme Court, government, Knesset, what happens is that the Supreme Court enjoys approximately 40% high-level trust, whereas the government enjoys the low, about 10 or 12 level trust. So the picture in terms of the public is very clear. Whereas the public is torn and troubled and faces these conflicts with the sense of powerlessness, at the same time, it's clear where the public trust lies, and it is not with the government or the parties or the Knesset. So whatever optimism that can still give us, I want to thank you. You have been amazing as always, and there were quite a number of other comments and questions that we did not get to, but maybe we'll find a way of getting to them. So thank you so much, and thank you for the amazing work that the Democracy Institute and you are doing on a variety of issues, not just this judicial overall challenge. And I urge you to take advantage of the fantastic Hebrew and English website of the Israel Democracy Institute. And we will see you all on June 30th, when we'll dig further into the events and show you that whereas they may appear as issues of security, as issues of peace, as issues of coexistence, at the bottom, they are more often than not involving religion and state conflicts. Thank you, Shalom, Laila Tov. And certainly here, Professor Navot, it's already dark.
Well, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter, our co-chair of the Jewish Pluralism Legal Action Network.
Yep.
Thank you, and shalom to all.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Thank you.